Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Stats Chat, which is, of course, your weekly podcast series. All the regular listeners will know that I go through and analyze almost anything about the game that's going on, and generally like to try and tell it to you exactly how it is. So that's what we're going to be doing today. It's Thursday evening, and I was actually a little bit of a loss for what I was going to talk about this week. And then, luckily, I was absolutely saved by Simon, and they have just released the first of what we assume will be a series. Think it pretty much outlines that there is going to be a series, all in short order, of Visions in the Flames. Of course, everybody remembers back to a year ago. If you were playing back then, it was an exciting time, a time of turmoil, when we started to see lots of the changes that were going to come in version 1.5, version 1.5.1, which of course is the biggest update that the game ever received. You know, we've had 1.6, but that is absolutely nothing by comparison to what 1.5 was. And we'd never received anything that big before 1.5 either. They were all really, really small updates. So we've pretty much thrown ourselves back 1 year in so many ways. Content creators who have been quiet for a very long time are suddenly coming out the woodwork again. I think there's quite a bit of hype, and you know, let's analyze what is in this Visions of the Flame. In the kind of way that I'm sure that Michael Schnall hates. He hates actually having his writing and the things that he says looked into. We'll look far too deep into them. We'll make some wild judgments and some wild speculation of what's going to happen. But no, really, I'll take a look and give you my first thoughts on that, because I think that the visions are super important. And, you know, absolutely first of all, I'm really pleased that it's come out. You know, I'm really pleased that there is something to talk about. So let's just start going. We'll not go line by line, but you know, we'll start looking at what's in it, and I'll give you my feelings on it all. So, of course, you know, the first thing we see is the banner for this page is actually a Stag Knight, some Mummer skirmishers, and then, Varys is front and center. That picture comes from Neutral Heroes 1. It's got Varys next to Roose and Littlefinger either side of him. But the first indication, particularly when we get to the bottom of this article and we see that there is a spoiler that Stag Knights are being very significantly changed, the indication here would be that these 3 units are all very much up for discussion about being changed. They are in line for changes. So, you know, that's a bit of wild speculation for you, but they are known to be 3 of the biggest issue points for people. Stag Knights, overcosted, never used. Skirmishers, even more so. Overcosted, never ever fielded in competitive armies. Varys, on the other hand, generally considered way overtaken, taken in every faction in one of your 2 lists, practically in nearly all competitive pairings include him in one form or the other, and people find him oppressive in just how much he's used and how much he controls the game and how much he shuts down opponents' plays. So really interesting, first of all, that is our banner selection. We have a little introduction at the start, and actually just straight away there is something that I want to mention, which is line 2 says Michael Schnall here, designer of A Song of Ice and Fire tabletop miniatures game. This is actually bigger than it should be. This almost seems crazy to even be saying it, but is really good news that this, I mean, conspiracy theories aside, that this piece was written by Michael himself. There have actually been lots of discussion, and more importantly, that he's willing to put his name to it. Not just that he wrote it, but that he's willing to say, I wrote this. And that I will be writing more pieces, because, you know, there has been lots of opinions and discussions, and the general feeling on Discord, I would say, is that Michael's not very involved in the game anymore. You know, every time he's been interviewed on anything in recent history, either to do with Song or not, most of his discussion has been about Masters of the Universe or, you know, various other projects that he's working on. So, just that pure confirmation that Michael is still working on Song will actually go a long way to kind of quieting quite a few people's fears about that. So, that part that he is working on the project is good, and that he's willing to put his name on it is also very good, because of the implication that therefore, he is working on the project, and that like these are things that he's willing to commit to. Like that's one of the main things, like when you put your name to something, you're willing to say it has my stamp of approval and I'm on board with this. So that's actually just like a really big good start. We go on to talk about delays and COVID. It is what it is. They're gonna say it's COVID. They say that things were delayed because of 2020. It happened. It caused production timelines to be moved back and become rather erratic. Personally, I don't believe it. As in, like, I will never believe. They of course can blame it, and they probably do, but I actually think they're lying to themselves, honestly, if they think that things would have been significantly better and significantly different were it not for COVID and were it not for like just the way the last year has gone, because the year before without it had the same issues, basically. 2020 hasn't been significantly different in terms of the way CMON have handled it to 2019. So that, he says so. I personally think that if he believes it, then he's lying to himself. CMON are lying to themselves, because point is there are many companies that have handled it significantly better. Many other miniature companies that have just continued to put out new releases, continued to keep their distribution good, continued to, most importantly, COVID did not stop CMON from being in contact with the community. Nothing stopped them from putting out pieces like this on a regular basis, monthly basis, or anything like that. But they chose not to. So, personally, I'm really not a fan of them coming out and just saying, it was COVID, guys, but there we are. That's where we're at. They talk about the fact that, they were planning physical cards and it got delayed, and now it's all going to come together with a big update. There's what he calls grandeur plans. And we basically, what's the key wording? They're going to do in 2021, which is a broad number, doesn't say quarter one. It says 2021 will see the release of full faction packs for each army. That's huge news. It will give you an opportunity to own physical copies of everything for your faction, but it's also going to allow them to update every individual unit, attachment, and tactics card in the game. Tactics card being the absolute most important thing. They have never touched the tactics card in this game so far, other than to give like the most top level FAQ on the way it interacts with other rules, timings, something like that. They've never gone in and changed a card. In the past, whenever they've tried to balance a commander, they've tried to balance it by changing the commander's like attachment abilities or their NCU abilities or something like that. So that they're willing to rebalance commander tactics cards, and even more importantly, the faction decks, which are known to have huge disparity in, is brilliant. Like, it's an actual huge step. He goes on to say, I'm sure it says somewhere, that this isn't a new edition of the game, but I mean, if we're going to change every tactics card in the game, then it is, essentially. And I'm really pleased about that. I do think that the game needs a huge update like that, because you'll be well aware if you watch these videos, I believe that the game has been in decline for a good 6 months now. I think it really needs that kind of kick. I don't know why they actually don't want to call it 2.0, other than I guess at some point they want to do a Kickstarter of a 2.0. But like that, they'll do everything that is to redo the game, but not call it a 2.0 is fine by me. I don't care what it's actually called. The question will be, going forward beyond this, how often these faction packs would be updated. And that is interesting. The fact that the War Council exists and that they could push out all changes digitally, and that would allow them to do more often, much more rapid updates to the game. And by rapid, I mean, like 6 monthly as opposed to annually. Because the thing about physical components, and lots of people have been saying, oh, they haven't updated the game because they released the 1.5, shiny foil cards. So people will get upset if you update the game more often, and yet you're selling a physical product that people need to pay to update to keep that in line. But I always believe that because of War Council, that wasn't necessary. Although obviously there are enough people who don't want to use War Council, they want to own physical cards. I of course will buy the new physical cards, but personally I would buy them every month if they were coming out. But lots of people will be against that. So I really hope that it doesn't actually herald a hard stop on the, them being able to accelerate the rate at which they improve the game, improve balance, because every time assuming you are getting better at this, and he talks about the fact that this is something that they've been getting better at, they've had time to see what's happened over the past 3 years. They he uses the words here, but we knew some areas could be improved. Just admitting that is quite big for Michael, it seems. He's almost never admitted that things could be improved, so that's a big step forward. Let's acknowledge that. But point is that if we say that changes are improvements to the game, and we assume they are, then we would want to make them as often as possible. We want to be improving the game as fast as possible. And if that becomes a hard stop and says, oh, but we released faction packs last month, so now you won't see any updates to the game for another year, I actually would be really unhappy about that. Personally, I'm very happy with War Council as the way for things to get updated. But you can see why faction tactics decks, particularly, and commander tactics cards, being something that you have to draw, you do want them to be a physical product, not just something on the app. So, faction packs are going to be huge. They are coming in 2021. Who knows what that means date-wise. He then talks about, how everything being changed is a scary prospect, but that most things didn't change, he says. Okay, interesting. If we're going to make sweeping changes to the game, I'd like them all to be tweaked. Personally, I think that everything can be tweaked, but I guess you can tweak too many things at the same time. We'll see what he actually means by that. If we're actually just talking about Stag Knight, Skirmishers, and Varys changing, then they've absolutely missed what the community want, in my opinion. And I don't think that they are just talking about those few things changing. I think they're talking about much more sweeping changes. So I find it odd that he says that most things didn't change. So we'll see what that exactly means. He says that, they're mostly talking about streamlining things. Obviously, a lot of things could be done with keywords a bit better. They've talked about that, when they turned Sikkim into charging volley and things like that, where even there are some very old tactics cards which effectively give vicious, but vicious didn't used to exist as a keyword, or kind of things like that. So, hopefully there'll be some small improvements there, and I hope that there will be lots of small tweaks to units, because I believe that that's the best way that we get to balance. Often regular small tweaks. So we'll see what they've done. And then he comes on to say that this is the topics that he's going to touch on in the coming the coming set of Visions and Flames, we assume. What regularity they'll come with, I don't know. But let's take a little look into them. First one, he says, is faction styles and roles. What makes this faction cool, and how can it do it better? Sorry, bit odd sentence there. This one's very interesting to me, because obviously, this is a very philosophical point. I mean, they're all proposed in philosophical ways. as opposed to just like discussion point. They're all discussion points. They're all things that he's going to like talk about. But this one is the one I'm most interested in as just like a concept. And that's sort of to do with like how different should factions be. Of course, the real important part here is talking from balance perspective, talking from as a competitive player. I love song as a background. I read the the extended background. The other books outside of just what A Song of Ice and Fire is. The main plot series. We're talking about other timelines, all that kind of stuff. All right, so I'm interested in the game from a background perspective, but I play this game on the tabletop for a good balanced game that has tactical depth. When you make every faction unique, and we are talking about 7 factions, 8 with Greyjoys, if the neutrals are ever going to be able to call themselves a faction again anytime soon, if we try and make them all unique, if they are all unique, truly unique, and have very special things going on, then that makes it far more difficult to balance. So the more common themes they have amongst them, the more things that you can compare across factions, and I don't mean like players comparing, I mean the designers can look at and say, yes, these two things are similar, they fulfill a similar role, and they cost a similar amount, or whatever. The more similar things you have, the easier it is for you to balance the game. The more unique you make each faction, the more like very specific combos you build into them, all that kind of stuff, the more difficult it is to balance. So I think that from a conceptual standpoint, just how cool and how unique a faction style and role is supposed to be will actually be a very interesting read, and that's probably one of the ones I'm most interested to see come out and see what he has to say on that part. He talks about the impact of tactics cards and free actions as another one. I think that's just generally talking about, I think he's going to hopefully broach, that there will be changes to tactics cards for the first time. I think that they in the past have massively underrated how valuable it is to gain entirely free actions. So the kind of the very early equivalency would be, for example, the difference between the Northern members and a Lannister pays his debts. You can't compare cross factions, but practically every faction has a card which is, when a unit dies, do XYZ. You see the complete polar opposite of the North Remembers, which is remove an activation marker from a unit and heal as well. I forget if you control swords, versus a Lannister pays his debts, which is place two tokens, and if you control money bags, draw a card back. Lannister pays his debts is known to be one of the weakest cards, like in the Lannister deck, but also basically one of the weakest cards on a kind of revenge mechanic, unit dies mechanic. When a friendly unit dies, do this XYZ thing. Lannister pays his debts is known to be terrible, whereas North Members is absolutely game changing, and you have to think about it continuously throughout playing against Starks. You always have to ask yourself whether or not you're going to kill that direwolf who's just sitting there looking like bait, because it will allow your opponent to reactivate whatever unit, berserkers that are just going to absolutely destroy you. So I think early in the game, they didn't understand how diametrically different the impact these two cards had upon the game. And hopefully that's what they're going to address, that they've been giving some factions tons of ways to just take like game-changing actions, swift advance, things like that, North Remembers, blah, blah, blah. That just makes the Stark deck so inherently powerful. Whereas by the time we came to the Baratheons, yes, they get lots of out-of-action actions in a way. What they get is they get countercharge, and they get Ours is the Fury, and they get Last Stand, but they all come with incredibly tight stipulations on when they can be done, whereas the Stark ones are just like so incredibly easy to make happen by comparison. So I think I'm very, very, I cannot possibly tell you how happy I am that the base tactics deck will be getting changed, or at least I believe it will be. And that hopefully they'll be toning down the number of free actions that you take, because I think that the differences in the base tactics deck has basically just, made it almost impossible for them to get any better with balance. They are trying to account for the fact that one faction just like is playing a different playing on easy versus the other one before you've even added any units. We're just talking about on the cards that you draw and what you can do with them. So I think that that's super important for balance going forward. NCUs, attachments, and the focus of combat units, levels of power. This one's interesting. This one is something that I've been speaking about forever. I mean, like, me and Mickey have been talking about this for ages. Basically, I would say for me, the balance is currently with NCUs are the most powerful thing in the game for their points cost at their current thing, up until the limit of roughly 3. So they're so powerful that some people even take 4, and it's not crazy. To take 1 is like unheard of competitively. 2, it loses significantly to 3, and then we end up with this 3 versus 3 general kind of state of play. That's because what they bring is so powerful for their cost. Attachments are the complete polar opposite, which is that attachments in general are the weakest thing in the game, because outside of the attachments that are giving direwolves, giving activations in some kind of way, they are not providing enough to their unit across the board to be worthwhile. We see from the stats page, we see that almost every unit in the game has a lower win rate with almost any attachment in it, other than a very few specific like combos. And even combos that you think are supposed to work, like a Champion of the Faith in Poor Fellows do better without one. They have a higher win rate when you just use them at 5 points, because moving from 5 points to 6 points is not worth what an attachment can give you. And hopefully this will broach the subject of the fact that activations, just sheer number of things that you can activate and do something with and delay the turn for an amount of time, hopefully we're going to broach that concept, and he will openly say, I really, really hope that he will say that activations are currently too powerful, and that I would like to see the cheapest activation in the game move to 4 points, personally. And whatever that means, yes, that means that Jorah has to be better, that Watch Marshal has to change already. It means that all your 3-point NCUs have to go. They have to become 4-pointers and cost something. All your NCU commanders can't cost 0 anymore, in my opinion, because that's currently just like a hard limit on the fact that NCU commanders are almost always better, except in a few cases where they just have terrible abilities. And it means that, all your direwolf attachments, they have to become more expensive. Your free folk raiders have to become 4 points. Everything has to go up, in my opinion, because I hate this current race to just filling the board. That's my personal opinion, though. That's what I would like to see happen. I would like to see there be a new baseline of what an activation costs, because an activation is worth 3 points in itself before it even does anything. So we'll see what he comes across there. Next one after that is, he says he's going to talk about combat math and how killy is too killy. This one has been Mickey particularly. Mickey has been banging on about this one for 6 months, pretty much. Interestingly, I don't bang on about it because I actually play super defensive armies, so I don't care that much about how killy a killy unit is. But Mickey, on the other hand, he hates how killy units are in this game, and a lot of other people are too. The game is massively, when played properly in an alpha strike state, where basically we just wait until we have a chance to make an action that has no counter after our opponent has finished activating, and no matter what we do it with, we're pretty much going to try and attack something, either kill it in one or leave it in such a state that it's absolutely guaranteed that the first action of next round I will kill it. And then I'm just going to be able to really double down and capitalize on the fact that I have activation advantage. And while that is good tactical play, the fact that it's so easy, and most importantly, this is the thing that Mickey's been banging on about for ages, that you are able to reliably do that with a unit of 5-point cutthroats is an issue for the game. That cutthroats at 5 points can double tap most things. That Stark Sworn Swords are so unbelievably killy at 5 points. That, Bran Berserkers at 9 points, but bringing an extra activation can just absolutely smash everything. I think leads us to the fact that things are too killy in this game. There are no protracted combats. Even in a lot of cases, we just charge something in the front, we're going to double tap it. So, we'll see what he has to say about that. And I guess I'm really glad that he's got it there on the list. It's something that, like I say, has been Mickey's been championing for 6 months. So it sounds like they are listening to people who know stuff about this game. So yeah, we'll see. Elements of control. Do what you want when you want or not? ? Control is a very interesting one. Control is controversial, shall we call it. Mostly because some people like control, as in control styles of play. Often these are players possibly who come from, more like card playing backgrounds than those who have come to it from Warhammer. They haven't come to it from a miniatures tabletop perspective. They come to it from a card game perspective, where they expect control is inherent in those games. Like, there is no game unless you, in a card game, unless there's control and interaction and counterplay and counterplot. If there aren't those things, then you're not playing a game. If you're playing a card game like Magic, etc. But in a tabletop game, lots of people come to it from a background where they expect to be able to do what they want during their turn. So it is a bit of a controversial topic, and two of the things that are least liked in the game are Varys and Tyrion. So, and particularly they then get control thrown together often. People don't enjoy playing into control is the problem, as much as some people like it, and it can be powerful, and it can also be balanced. It's not like Tyrion. I mean, Tyrion is pretty much one of your best Lannister choices, but it's not like Tyrion is dominating the game. Other types of control are currently dominating the game, just being activation, control, tempo control. But people have a real issue with lots of different forms of control. So we'll see what he says there. Personally, I am a control style player, so I'd rather it didn't go away. I don't want there to be no counterplay. Then we're basically just playing Warhammer Fantasy. So the last two specifically, we'll see what he has to say, and I'll be really interested to see where it goes, and a little bit apprehensive of those ones, because the others are just super interesting. Great, you've kind of got on board with these things, but if we massively reduce how killy units are, and at the same time massively reduce the amount of control, then I do believe that we massively reduce the level of tactical play in the game. If we get to a point where combats become grinding and really dice dependent, and if we get to the point where there isn't any interplay anymore, and that we can't we can't counterplay during our opponent's turn, then the game becomes far less interesting to me. Might as well go and play a skirmish Infinity Batman miniatures game, whatever. Do you know what I mean? At that point, we're playing fantasy, and I left fantasy for this game because it was better. The final one is he's talking about streamlining and refining the game language, which hopefully maybe means that they're willing to admit that their rules language isn't always the best. I do think that the game would be a lot easier. Here's a great example. Targeting. If we were able to streamline and refine the whole game, everything would specify what it targets. And then the discussion about Barris and Selmy would be very, very simple. Because every card would tell you. It would just say, you know, the one that I see all the time, like, loads of cards keep coming up all the time. But winter is coming. So on Discord just the other day, people are talking about winter is coming. Does it target? What does it target? And funnily enough, I've even forgotten what it targets. I think it targets the Stark unit. No. It is triggered by the Stark unit charging, but it targets the Baratheon unit that's being charged. We were talking about Baratheons. Well, no, we must be talking about Targaryens. Because you got Barris and Selmy. I think you have to be on your own unit that's about to be charged by the unit that then wants to play Winter is Coming for you to be able to say, no, I don't want to have Winter is Coming part of me. But all of this would be cleared up if Winter is Coming just said target, and then it just put in a key in bold, enemy unit, friendly unit, whatever. So if I hope that target's part of this. Other than that, it might just be, things like overrun. We've seen Victarians got a different overrun to the way overrun is currently worded in the cards. Personally, overrun should be a rule, which is just a rule, which is in the rulebook. And then it just says, you get overrun. It'd be a lot easier than them then repeatedly saying it on cards and saying what it is, because at the moment, from the spoilt card and the ability that Victarion has, his overrun is different to somebody else's overrun. Excuse me. So I'm super interested in what he has to say. Of course I am. I'm super interested in nearly all of those topics. Streamlining the usage, I already have expectations what I want it to be. I'm not sure if we are going to end up with everything saying what it targets, and if we don't, then I guess I'll be disappointed. So other than that, I just told you that faction styles, that's just a real interesting discussion to be having. Impact of tactics cards is something that Song of Ice and Fire stats has been showing is just not equal. That whole factions are just not on the same footing as each other, and it boils down to their tactics decks as well as the units that they have, and that when the tactics decks are so different, it's very, very hard to balance the units. The role that NCU's attachments and combat units play is the massive one, and I really, really hope that they're going to get that improved, because it's such a sad state of affairs that attachments just aren't used, because they're generally just wasted points. In competitive play, they don't get used, and when you do use them, you almost inevitably reduce your win rate, other than very, very, very specific combinations which enable new stuff. The combat math one is, like I say, more Mickey's the champion of rather than me. And elements of control, I'm actually apprehensive about. We'll see where they go with that, because I like the control aspects in this game. There are some that I don't. I don't like activation control. I don't like activation spam as a way to control your opponent in what they do and move, etc. But yes, we'll see again there. Streamlining, we'll see. It's also worth mentioning that you'll notice that we're also showcasing off a number of Greyjoy spoilers as well. That's an interesting point in itself. Does that mean that they're going to come at the same time, is the big question. If Greyjoys and the card packs are going to come at the same time, it's just a difficult. Who knows? Who knows? We're still in the who knows with Simon kind of phase here. Nobody puts any dates on these things. The only date we have in this article is 2021, which is absolutely a huge, wide timescale. So I'm not super like, oh my god, this is happening, because we might be talking, we might actually be talking about Q2 2021 here. For all we know, Mother of Dragons has been pushed back to Q1, as have Dervishes and Mammoths, which might mean that Greyjoys are pushed back to Q2. And if this and Greyjoys are Q2, this is pure speculation, but like previous track record says that just because Simon are talking about it doesn't mean that it's going to come out soon. We've seen that from when Champions of the Stag were revealed in March, maybe May, but it took them another 5 months, 6 months to get released. So I'm just saying, hold back your excitement that this is like something's happening next week. We end with a huge spoiler of a massive Stag Knight buff. It is massive. We've got a whole new ability, which is that they're going to gain cumulative effects as the round goes on. They're still 3+ to hit, 777, and now they're going to have Crit Blow round 2, Vicious round 3, Sundering round 4, and extra hits from round 5 onwards. This is on top of a new defensive order, which is that the unit will suffer 1 wound for every 2 unblocked hits after they get attacked. I'm sure somebody told me that it was melee, but it's not. It's just after they get attacked, so they can weather ranged hits as well. This unit is going to be very, very strong, and combat generally in this game, you can get some on turn 2, but really, the meat of the game happens on turns 3 and turns 4. So we're going to be talking about a unit that has a 777 profile with Crit Blow Vicious. That's really powerful. It looks like a great buff. I'm really glad that they've done something with Stag Knight, because they really needed it. The astute will say and see, and they don't tell us how many points they are. So we'll see whether or not they decide that those buffs were worth a point change, or if this just like is what a unit is now. Conceptually speaking, I'd say at 8 points, if they stayed 8, they'd be pretty strong. If anything, it's maybe where 8 points is supposed to be. Like, when you look at the kind of 8-point units that get used, 8-point infantry doesn't get used very often at all. And so it's well in the region of usable at 8 points. Who knows? I'd have to see it on the table, see what else is happening, see whether or not you still end up with all their free attacks at the same time. That is not a unit that we can use. Look, like, before anybody even like starts saying, oh, let's test it, this is absolutely one part of a huge set of changes. If we go back a year, let's go back a year to last set of Vision in Flames. Let's also put, some let's put some warnings out there, right? People cried about the sky was falling to do with Lannisters. To be honest, it turns out they were, in a decent part, relatively right. That panic changes would kill off the way the Lannisters work, and that was really terrible, and that panic just didn't work anymore. Now, that turned out to all be not true. You hadn't seen all the fallout, hadn't seen the way things changed. So these can't be taken in isolation. There could be huge changes to the game that come with them, and there is no point in testing them without it, without knowing the whole set of changes. So I would just say there is no point in playing half of the rules. Like, just because they're going to feed them to us a week at a time, every 2 weeks, whatever these come out as, don't start thinking, okay, that one's now in place, so let's start playing that unit. Who knows what happens with it? Maybe the whole, we've already speculated that the whole Baratheon deck could change. This unit could be way overpowered when in combination with Ours is the Fury, countercharge and last stand, or it could be, useless up until the point where we see other changes to Baratheon deck or other changes to Baratheon supporting units, or the attachments get changed. And plus, we don't even know how much this unit costs, which is probably why they covered it up, so that you can't use it, because they know that they can reveal everything they want about a unit except its cost, and people pretty much can't use it, can't implement it in any builders, can't use it on TTS without just wildly speculating on what its cost is. So yeah, don't try and use it, guys. Don't try and implement any half rules. If it turns out, that next week that Panic's gone back to the old system where every number that you fail the test by is a wound, don't implement it until you've seen the full version change. It would be my advice. It does feel like it feels very similar to a year ago. We are increasing in some hype towards this set of changes, towards the Greyjoys coming out, towards what is now going to be the release of the dragons and the mammoths and lots of new stuff. I really, really hope that it comes soon. If this is 6 months away, then it's way too little too late. I also hope that this isn't, going back 1 year, I hope that this isn't the same as we were a year ago, where we get a January 1.7, as it would be, 1.7. Maybe it follows a couple of weeks later with a 1.7.1, where, half the units get changed, then the other half get changed, which I don't know why they would possibly think that's a good idea. Personally, I think just change them all. If we got that change and then we had radio silence for another year again, then for me the game will be dead or dying from 3 to 4 months after that time. I really hope that it heralds a new era of them having more communication with the community directly, and we can only hope for that. Also, like I say, content creators who've been quiet for forever are kind of coming out the works and stuff like that. So there's obviously hype around the game, but you'll notice that tons of content creators have gone quiet. And then we're not just talking about, the controversies around Blitz Minis and stuff like that. We're talking about actually just content creators just haven't been making stuff, haven't been doing stuff, the majority of, because there's been nothing good to talk about. And other than, I talk about negative stuff all the time, which means I've had plenty to talk about. But the content creators who are, the fanboys, the ones who just, say, everything's great. Oh, isn't this great? They've had nothing to say. This is great. So they've disappeared. And we see them turn back up, which means that things are good, or at least they think that things are good. So it can hopefully herald in a new era of hype, a whole new. I think that it should just be 2.0. This, I hope it's as big as worthy of being basically called a 2.0. It will probably be called 1.7, and I'm fine with that, as long as in reality it's more like a 2.0 or a complete reboot, stuff like that. But like I say, what matters to me isn't how good it is from day one. I don't believe that they can, in behind closed doors, have created a new perfect balanced system without any input from the majority of players. That they can't have just created this perfect game that will stand the test of time come day one when it gets released. So I hope that they have a new openness with which they're willing to make changes, and that we're not stuck with it for the next year. And so, you know, we'll see what kind of ethos we read into over the next coming weeks with the Visions of Flames, assuming that it is weeks. Again, don't know on that kind of front. But like, it looks like, you know, this looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Visions of the Flames, 6 weeks. That would bring us early mid-January. That would be a year since the last update. That was when they said they were going to do it. Again, back up here, they said they were going to do an update in a year. Whether or not that comes with the faction packs is the big question. Whether or not 2021's release of the faction packs is the same as these Visions and Flames are indicating is the big question. And whether or not Greyjoys are going to end up in Q1 2021, considering they're supposed to already be out in Q4, is another big question. So, hey guys, huge reveals, huge set of interest. Let's see what happens, and let's hope that it's a new era of openness, because that would be what's best for the game. And I'm really glad that the things that me and Mickey have been banging on about for months, the things that Song of Ice and Fire Stats has managed to bring to the front, you know, like, I do think that this overhaul wouldn't be anywhere near as big were it not for the role that Song of Ice and Fire Stats has had in showing where the current imbalances are. So, you know, maybe it has had a positive impact eventually now, you know, finally. Because I've spoken about in the past, I feel like, if anything, it's been having a negative impact at the site because it's brought around a lot of negative discussions about the fact that CMON aren't addressing these issues that the community are very, very aware of, that the community talk about endlessly, but that CMON remained silent on. So that they're at least talking about them, hopefully will quieten lots of kind of fears. And maybe I completely overestimate the role that Song of Ice and Fire Stats had in it, because, you know, like I say, I see all of the game. I see it through the lens of Song of Ice and Fire Stats. Like, I spend a lot of time on the site. And, you know, obviously I spend a lot of time talking about all these things. Whenever I see, you know, people discussing things, you know, I'm like, we said that months ago, you know, like, go back 3 months ago. There's a video of us saying that. And pretty much all of these things right here, you can go back and see a video of where Song of Ice and Fire Stats talked about them. We will see whether or not Schnall has the same kind of viewpoint on them is the real interesting thing. Whether or not he's going to say, you know, attachments are underpowered, we're going to make attachments better. NCUs are overpowered, we're going to make them more expensive, kind of thing. So let's wait for that one. See whether or not my and Mickey's viewpoints on that are kind of unfounded, or whether or not we'll get some agreement there. I guess coming to Tawny Ground, where on Monday, where we will of course be discussing these things. You'll get Mickey's input on it. There's always every so often there's some guests on there as well. You get a bit of interesting stuff from them. But this kind of news is definitely the things that get discussed live on Tawny Ground. That's 1900 7 o'clock p.m. on a Monday night GMT. So head over to that one if you can. If not, just watch it back after. Majority of people still watch it back after, but there is a ton of discussion that goes on in the chats there, so come along if you can. And of course, check out the Patreon. Getting kind of popular there. There's a really good community growing, and it's always going to be taking it a step further, going bigger and better with the game. So come along and join that community if you can. There'll be a link down below. And if not, I'll put it back on the site by request. That thing will pop up that constantly tells you when you're on the site, hey, join the Patreon. So, exciting stuff, guys. I'll speak to you soon. Have a good one.